We'll be going back to Jane Hill in Portugal very shortly, but first this news about Tony Blair and an announcement tomorrow, Emily.
Yeah, very confused picture, actually. We know that Blair is to make an announcement on the future tomorrow. We've been expecting this for some time. It's the worst kept secret in Westminster, indeed in the media, that the Prime Minister is to make an announcement on his future as leader of the governing Labour Party, obviously. This is confirmed by his office, yet we've also had some indication from the PM's official spokesman that this speech tomorrow, this statement, is not about his position as Prime Minister. That was, of course, what we were all expecting, which we continue to expect. But we understand from the official spokesman this is not about his position as Prime Minister and that he's not going to resign tomorrow as party leader. So the PM's official spokesman is saying that that statement will come tomorrow. It will be about the Labour Party in some form, but that Tony Blair will not resign as party leader. He will not resign as Prime Minister. Tomorrow is about setting out his intentions. Very loose wording here. We're not quite sure what to make of this, but it will not affect his position as Prime Minister, nor indeed as the leader of the Labour Party. But we understand that Mr Blair will be attending the Cabinet and making that announcement before going elsewhere to make the announcement. We're expecting that to be in his constituency, indeed in the north, in Sedgefield. But we know that he'll be telling his Cabinet colleagues of his intentions tomorrow morning, but making no public statement. Also, this is quite an interesting move, that it won't be to what they term the Westminster Village. When it comes, that statement will be in Sedgefield. We understand at this point, where he has, of course, been an MP for all these years.
Yes, the normal routine on such days is that the Cabinet meeting is held. The Prime Minister obviously tells people what he wants to do, and then he comes out onto the steps of Downing Street, where we have reporters and cameras always waiting for it, but he's not going to be doing that, as Emily's just saying. He will go somewhere else, we presume to Sedgefield, to his constituency, to announce what he's going to do. Been a very long, drawn-out business, this, of course. Something like, I don't know, 18 months ago now, it must be, since he said that he did not intend to go on as Prime Minister. And when he said that, very much criticised that making life very difficult for any successor. And then we've had all the business recently with Gordon Brown coming in as... obviously, he's the one who wants to become the next leader of the Labour Party. And indeed, he will be now, other challengers having more or less fallen away.
I think we should go straight to James Landale, Chief Political Correspondent. James, what do you make of all this, then?
There's a slight confusion here that's built up in recent days over precisely what the Prime Minister is or is not going to announce tomorrow. And essentially it's because basically Labour's leadership rules are hugely confusing and not exactly cast in stone, and a lot of it's made up on the hoof by the party's ruling National Executive Committee. But what's just been announced by the Prime Minister's official spokesman actually is nothing new. It's what we knew all along, which is that tomorrow what we're going to get is not the Prime Minister's resignation, either as party leader or as Prime Minister. All we're simply going to get is a date, essentially a date when the Prime Minister says he will stand down, he will resign as both leader of the Labour Party and as Prime Minister. So if you like, what's happening tomorrow is he's handing in his cards, an old-fashioned phrase that probably doesn't mean much these days because not everybody has cards anymore. But that's what he's doing. He's handing in his notice, essentially saying, right, this is the date. So what we will get tomorrow is absolute clarity on the precise moment when the Prime Minister will stand down. That will start the process formally to find his successor. But he remains, during the next 7 weeks or so, he remains both party leader. He also remains Prime Minister. He's got a lot to do. I mean, he's got a summit in Germany for the G8. Lots of discussions about climate change there. He's also got a European summit in Brussels to discuss the future plans for restoring not quite the whole of the European constitution that was defeated in a couple of referendums, but a mini constitution. So there's a lot of other business that remains. He will remain Prime Minister. He will remain leader of the Labour Party until that date that we expect to be the end of June, beginning of July, at which point he ceases to be both.
So, James, what we've heard then is just the formality, if you like, to get round that confusion. It's all pretty much according to plan from the sound of it. And do we know, given this 7 weeks is, am I right in saying, pretty much set in stone, we can now work out that exact date?
No, nothing, as I say, is set in stone, which is rather unuseful. Essentially, what the Labour Party has said is that once the Prime Minister announces his intention formally to resign at a certain date, then the process of selecting his successor begins. And from the moment that, and this, bear with me because they don't make it easy, the moment the National Executive Committee, the party's ruling committee, if you like, meets following that announcement by the Prime Minister, we expect it to be probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday coming. The minimum of 7 weeks from that period, his successor will be announced. But it's only a minimum and it's fairly flexible. They want to make the announcement at a weekend so it's easy for party members to get to, because if they do these kind of things in the middle of the week, it's difficult for people to get out of jobs and things like that. So they leave it fairly free, but it's basically going to be around 7 weeks after the announcement by the Prime Minister, and that takes us to around the end of June, the beginning of July.
And if we're going to carry on this sort of preemptive game, and I ask you to imagine exactly what will happen tomorrow, then do you imagine what will be the wording, what will be the style, what will be the flavour of how Tony Blair goes about this?
To be the absolute honest truth, we don't really know. There have been lots of confusing messages emerging from the Prime Minister's camp on this. There are some people who say that it is a big moment. The Prime Minister is formally announcing when he's going to go, and so therefore he'll want to maybe reflect on years past and his legacy that he hands on to his successor. But on the other hand, there is another school of thought that says no, actually he wants to be fairly brisk, business-like about it. In other words, say, look, it's business as usual. I might be going soon. I'm not gone yet. The Prime Minister's official spokesman this morning made very, very clear that he will remain, to use his phrase, fully engaged both domestically and internationally. I mentioned those two big international events. We've also got, I imagine, various announcements on health and education. Until that time, other foreign trips that we know the Prime Minister has got lined up. So it's going to be a busy, busy schedule, and particularly, as I say, negotiating the future return of a mini European constitution will, I think, keep the Prime Minister quite busy in the coming days and weeks.
And do you think, briefly, any mention of Gordon Brown tomorrow, or is this TB's day?
Well, the Prime Minister has always said that he will make clear precisely who he will vote for in a future leadership contest once he's made the announcement himself that he's formally going. Everybody expects him to vote for Gordon Brown. He has hinted in the past pretty substantially that that is the man who he wants to be Prime Minister. If you remember, in the dying days of the election, he said in Scotland that he expected a Scot to be the next Prime Minister, and he said that he always thought that Gordon Brown would make a great Prime Minister. So he's effectively partially endorsed Gordon Brown. He has still yet formally to say who he shall vote for. We expect that to happen at some stage. Whether it happens tomorrow remains to be seen, because there might be a school of thought within Downing Street that says it will be improper for the Prime Minister to say who he is endorsing while nominations remain open. So he might feel it's better to wait until nominations have closed, and if it is just Gordon Brown who is standing and maybe one other figure on the left, then the Prime Minister, I think, at that point might make his announcement. But as we say, I think all these plans are very much up in the air and still to be decided.
And someone else has got a busy day tomorrow, James. Thanks very much indeed.